Hello and welcome to day 17 of Vlogmas. Today was a journeying home, travelling home day, so I don't have much to share with you, just a tiny little bit of footage which I'll pop at the end. But yeah, I thought I would do another book vlog. So carrying on from the last one, as I said, I will do a separate Agatha Christie one. So this is all the other books, so I'll pop the pictures up. So the first ones to talk about are the Sarah J Maas court ones. I started reading the Court of Thorns and Roses. I had a moment there where I forgot, which I did enjoy. So I've read 3 of her books in that series. I did enjoy it, although there were some things that I didn't enjoy, if that makes sense. Didn't like Tamlin very much, annoyed the heck out of me, but anyway. And even Feyre kind of annoyed me a bit sometimes, but I wanted to find out what happened, so that's why I kept reading, and I did really enjoy it as the book went on. So I continued and read the second one, A Court of Mist and Fury, which was really good. I think it was one of my favourites. I loved Valaris, the way it was described, and I liked Rhys a lot. It's funny, the characters kind of, from reviews I've read, the characters bring up very mixed feelings for folks. Some people are like, oh, I can't stand this character and I love that one, and it's just the way we are, and obviously the things we identify in people that we like or don't like. But I did like Rhys, and I liked Valaris, as I said. And then the third book I read, A Court of Wings and Ruin, it was very good in some ways, but it was very long, and I can't remember what phrase it was. 2 seconds till I check, because I did write it on my thing. Oh yeah, my mate and vulgar gesture. Those 2 things, I was like, oh my god, if I have to see that again, I'm going to scream. There's so much that could have been like condensed and made a much better book. So it's not perfect, the series, but I know a lot of people enjoy it, and I did enjoy like lots of parts of it. I liked the story of the battle with Highburn, and trying to I wanted to find out what happened to that, so that's why I kept reading. I did enjoy a lot of it, but there are other bits that could have been cut out and would have still been as good, if not better. But that's my personal opinion. Nobody's perfect, are they? And no book is perfect, I don't think. So I did start reading the 4th one in the series, but I was kind of put off by the romance, I suppose you could call it that. It was a bit too much, the start of it, so I don't know, I might go back at some point. I've seen lots of people say how they loved that one and they loved the 5th book, so I might go back and read them, but I thought I kind of needed a break. I wasn't in the mood for the smutty side of things, I suppose, at that point. But I might go back at some time and read it. So I haven't read any of the rest of her books, but I don't know, I might at some point. There's another series that she's done, I can't remember what it's called, but people have also said how good it is, so who knows, we might read more of them. The next one to talk about was The Victory Garden. Now, this one is set in the First World War, and the way the back, like this blurb on the back kind of spoke, I had good expectations for it, but I was pretty disappointed. I mean, overall it was all right, but so it's about a garden and how it brings like a girl and a I can't remember if he was a soldier now. It's ridiculous. So that shows how it didn't stick very well in my mind. But I think he was a soldier or an airman or something. But they kind of come together because of this garden, and then she's left afterwards to continue. I don't know how quick to word it without spoiling it in a way. But it felt like the most exciting bit of it didn't happen until 2/3 of the way through the book, and then there's like the last little bit was the best bit of it. I mean, it was all right, not heavy reading or anything like that, but it just, I think it could have been done differently and it could have been better. But then again, that's my opinion. So it's going to sound like I'm really moaning about, because the next two I've got a bit of criticism about as well, but it's just as I read them. Maybe it was the mood I was in at that point in the year, I don't know, probably a bit stressed or something, who knows. So the next one was Accidental Magic. Now, so if you like the Gilmore Girls, you'll probably like this book. I really liked it, but yeah, so there's a couple of things. It's written as if it's set in America, but it's actually set in Britain, which I didn't work out until well into the book, and then they said something and I'm like, oh, because the wording, is it phraseology, is that how you say it? It just doesn't seem British. It annoys me when books do that, when somebody writes about Scotland or Britain and they obviously don't know enough or don't see the differences between America and Canada and Britain. It's a very personal thing. It's like how people don't always see the difference between Scotland and England, or Scotland and Wales, or Scotland and Ireland, or England and Wales and England and Ireland and things. It's just like, it's annoying because we are all different. And if you're going to write a book, you should be acknowledging that fact and making sure it's blinking authentic. But that's just me. There's probably a lot of other people that write about other countries and I don't notice it because it's not where I'm from and it's not my culture and it's not my life. So anyway, but I did really enjoy Accidental Magic. Again though, the action kind of happened in the last two chapters, which I find frustrating because it could have been paced much better. But there's a whole series of like 8 books, so I'm guessing the intention was to kind of take your time and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, we're at the end of the book, I better hurry up through this. But it was very good. It was a light read. And I would read the next one in the series. There were a couple of things that niggled me about that one, I must be honest. The following book I read was called The Ashes of London. And this one was on my list for ages because it's set around the time of the fire of London and the plague and everything. It was really intrigued me. It's a murder mystery. I really enjoyed it. It very much felt like it was set in that time, and I was listening to it, so it felt like it was one of those books that I was listening to while I was doing things. So I kept having to pull myself into the reality because it was so good at kind of describing things. I felt like I was kind of moving between times, but the murder mystery wasn't really a mystery, if that makes sense. I felt that was a bit disappointing because there were no surprises. There's nothing to be like, oh, I suppose maybe I'm just used to Agatha Christie kind of tricking you along the way so that you don't always know for sure until you get to the end. This one, it was pretty obvious, I thought. But it was a really good book, and there are more with the 2 main characters in it working together to solve other things, I think. So I might read another one at some point. But yeah, I did enjoy it. It was nice to read something that was of a different time period than I normally read. Then I had A Very Typical Family. I really enjoyed this one, just because it was modern day and quirky, if that makes sense. So it's about 2 sisters and a brother, and one of the sisters got the other sister and brother sent to jail, and then their mum dies, and they haven't seen each other since that happened, and they've all to come together in their family home, and it was really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It just felt very real, if that makes sense. Like everything, the quirkiness of families, the dynamics and the issues that everyone has, let alone the extra issues because of the storyline. But yeah, I liked it. I thought it was a good one. Then I read All the Light We Cannot See. So this one I actually listened to rather than read. I think if I'd listened to it, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. I did enjoy it. It's very good, but because it flips back and forth between people and it flips through different time periods in the war, the Second World War, I found it a bit confusing. purely because the audiobook had one person narrating. It wasn't like they changed voices, or it was clear enough to distinguish which one we were in. So sometimes because I was doing things, it took me a moment to work out where I was, and I don't know, it kind of didn't, the flow of it didn't feel quite so good. But it's a very good story. I really did enjoy it. Yeah, kind of makes you question what you would do in a similar situation, and if you were in that place or that time. And I like books that do that. It's always good to be questioned and make you think about other people's feelings and your feelings. So that one's a good one. The next one was called The Binding. So this one's based on the idea that if you had a memory that was very upsetting, you could be bound, and that memory would be put in a book, and you would have no memory of it then. It would be stored in that book, and you could move on with your life and not have to deal with whatever it was. So that instantly made me like, oh, really like it. It's a very good book, but it should come with trigger warnings, because there's a bit that I find very upsetting where an animal is treated badly and dies. And that was horrible. It nearly made me stop reading, because I'm just not good with things like that. I hate anything where animals get hurt. Same as child abuse or anything, and vulnerable people being that is something that I really can't, gets to me. So that was about, where was it, near this end of the second part, because it's kind of broken up into people and their stories, and then so the second one, I think the end of the second bit, if I remember rightly, you can kind of tell if you're reading it that there could be something coming, but it's still upsetting. It was only a short bit though, so that was one of the reasons I kind of continued. And I'm glad I did, because I did really enjoy it. But as well, there's also suicide, rape, and like manipulation, coercion kind of thing, which is all very uncomfortable feeling, but part of the story, an important part of the story. But it's a fantastic story. I did really enjoy it. So I would recommend that one if you can handle those things. If you can't, then definitely don't read it. Because there's no point in reading things that would trigger you and upset you if you're not in a place to deal with it, because sometimes we just aren't then. There's some things that I just can't read, and then there are other things that I can get through, because at that point in time I can cope with it. And I think it's important that, I saw someone say recently that they wished books came with trigger warnings, and I do think it's important. Like if there was a section somewhere in the book, maybe it could even be near the back, so that people don't instantly see it if they're not bothered about it, but they could, if you know that there are certain things that trigger you, you could look and see, right, this could upset me for whatever reason. I think the person that was talking about it was talking about child loss, and they said that they wished there'd been a trigger warning because they will never read another book by that person again. And I think that's important. I think it's very respectful for authors to think about the effect they have on people with their books too, because it's very easy to think that, oh, it's fiction, it's not going to upset anybody, but it does. That's the whole point of books, that we read to feel things and put ourselves in other people's shoes, and I think it's important that that's respected. And that book should definitely come with a trigger warning or two. Anyway, right, after that I read Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. So this is the prequel to Practical Magic. Now, I did watch the film years ago, but I haven't read Practical Magic, and I haven't seen the film for years and years. So I kind of had forgotten a lot about it, but this is like set way in the past, about the kind of ancestor of the sisters, if I'm right in remembering. So it was very good. I loved one of the characters instantly. One of them, it took me a good bit longer to kind of grow to like, but I think it's just the way, that's the whole point, is that it takes time to build up to the main character. But it was very good. I liked the magical elements. I liked the the strength in the characters, the female characters, was really cool. Just not giving in to things, not necessarily fighting, but also not necessarily just like accepting their time and their place and their public opinion of them, but being who they are. And I loved that. I really liked that in the story. I think it's important to remember that people haven't always been like, it's easy to look back in history and think that women were always treated badly and had no power at all of their own. And actually, women have always had power. It's just sometimes they haven't been able to show it. So I think it's important that this book very much kind of shows that, like, it's good to be yourself, to let your own personality shine and that sort of thing. So yeah, so I loved it. It was really good. I want to read the next one. But my sister's reading this series because she recommended that one to me. So she's reading it. So once she's finished, I'll read that. It's nice to have books to look forward to as well, I think. Sorry. That's right. Then I had The Last Party at Silverton Hall. So this is another one with a dual timeline. It's 1950s and then modern day. But it's mainly like the 1950s and then the granddaughter trying to figure out things based on that. It's kind of a mystery in a sense. I liked it because it's quite real in how people make promises and then have to live by those promises, and how it can affect other people and the secrets that we hold on to and our family and all those kind of things. I loved it. And it conjured up just like I liked reading the 1950s sort of section because it conjured up a really cool time. Even though that isn't the point of it, I felt the atmosphere of it was very true. So that was good. I've got my computer here so that I can look at all the books I've read. So I'm skipping the Agatha Christie ones, as I said. The next one was A Spoonful of Murder. Now, I did finish it because I wanted to know how it ended. But I was really not that happy with this book, I must be honest. So it's about three women friends who worked in a school and retired and still meet for coffee every week. And they bump into an old colleague called Topsy Joy, who it seems has dementia and is very confused. And then about a week later she's found dead, and they think because Topsy has a conversation with one of them in the bathroom and says something that makes it seem like someone said something like, it'd be better if I was dead. This friend thinks that Topsy's been murdered and she wants to find out. So they all kind of get involved in trying to solve what's happened to Topsy. But the way dementia is portrayed is very, very negative. And I know it's a difficult disease because I worked with people with it for a long time. I know how difficult memory problems are and how it can really be a struggle for families. So I'm very aware of that, but at the same time it's done in such a hopeless kind of way that I really struggled with it, because maybe I was very fortunate in my job to help bring some happiness into people's lives and help their families too. But this is like, oh, there's no hope, like a diagnosis like that, and it's basically like everybody's lives are destroyed. And I found I struggled with that. I also struggled with the three main characters because they were so selfish and bitter and just not very nice people at all. And I was like, it made it seem like as soon as people retire, all they care about is what's for their dinner and what's like their own lives and absolutely nothing to do with anyone else in the world. And they're all so cruel about each other. And I was like, I didn't like it at all. It's probably my least favourite book of the year, which is saying a lot because I don't like to be like that, but I had one last year that I really, really didn't enjoy, and this one this year. Yeah, maybe it's just me, because it felt kind of almost personal in a sense to me, but I didn't like it. I've seen mixed reviews, so some people do enjoy it, but it just wasn't my cup of tea at all. So I was relieved to go on to the next book because it felt so positive in comparison. It was crazy. So that was Elodie's Library of Second Chances. So that I didn't really enjoy the very beginning of this, because she is living this fancy life, having to go, and it's because her family own this big company in publishing, and she's a well-known face of the publishing company and things like that. So, and then she runs away basically and goes and gets a job in a library trying to rescue the library. But I loved it. It was such a good book. Excuse me. She comes up with this idea of a people library. So instead of, because the stock in the library is sort of run down, everything, there's nothing new, there's no money to buy stuff. So she decides, because she's met some interesting characters and people shun them in society. So one was homeless, one of them, her husband stole lots of money from local people, and they thought that it was her fault, or she got blamed for it even though he disappeared. One of them is an autistic boy, and people just don't know how to handle him, and the kids at school make fun of him and everything. So Elodie's idea is this people library where you can rent or take people out. You can sit and speak to them for half an hour and you can learn about their lives. And that I just loved that idea, because there's so much we can learn from each other. It's so easy to look at somebody in sort of in isolation and just not really take in who they are. And so I thought the idea of a library where we could get to know other people, get to know their stories, get to know what's been good and bad in their lives, what they have to deal with on a daily basis, or the way other people treat them. I think that is such a cool idea. So that was definitely one of my favourite easy reads of the year, but so good. And it was such a nice one, as I said, after the previous book. It was so positive. Following on from that was a nice festive one, A White Christmas on Winter Street. So, excuse me, this one is about a girl who buys a house at an auction that it has been her job. Her and her brother were adopted, and he is engaged to someone else, and this other person is really horrible to the sister and kind of causes the brother and sister to stop speaking and everything. And so she decides to go and buy this house and do it up, and then it's a romance, but it was nice to have a change and have a bit of a romance. And yeah, it kind of all works out in the end, which is lovely. It was a nice festive feeling one, and just making friends, and sort of the girl had been very much work based and her life revolved around that, so it was nice to see her making friends and having other interests, so that was good. Excuse me while I cut there, but I had a major coughing fit and I didn't want to share that with you. So the next book I read was called The Miseducation of Eevee Epworth. Now this one actually made me chuckle out loud a few times because I was listening to it. Just things that were really funny. It's set in the 60s. Yeah, I'm sure it's the 60s. It's a 16-year-old girl, so it's from her perspective, and her dad's wicked girlfriend. And yeah, it was really funny. I loved it. It was very good. Quite a naive perspective in some ways, but really witty, and I thought it was very good. It was a nice upbeat feeling. It made me laugh a good few times, and it was the time it's set in was a nice representation, I suppose, as well, so I enjoyed that one. It was good. Then I read One Moment in Time. So this one, earlier I was saying about when stories are set in Scotland, a lot of the time they're totally unrealistic, the way people are portrayed. Everyone's got a Mac name, and that annoys the heck out of me, because not everyone has. A lot of people do, but that's not the point. The way people are portrayed is not realistic at all. This one is set in Glasgow, and then Las Vegas, and yeah, it was just very real, very felt like proper Scottish family, if you know what I mean. Very realistic. I loved it. So it's about two people whose marriage is falling apart, and their daughters don't have a clue, book them a trip to Las Vegas where they got married for their, like, I can't remember, is it their 30th anniversary? I think so. To celebrate, and the aftermath of everything that happens and the decisions that were made at the time there, and the other two people that were their best friends who were also involved originally. And it's really good. I don't want to spoil it by giving away more, but it was really good. I definitely would recommend that one, because I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I did enjoy it. Then I read Calling WPC Crockford, which I will listen to. So this one is based on a true story of a 1950s policewoman. It's her daughter that's written it. So her mum used to speak a lot about, not without giving like details away, personal details, but she used to speak a lot about people, like stories, things that she'd experienced when she was training and first on the beat, and the things she'd had to deal with. So her daughter took the stories, because her mum's no longer here, and turned it into a book. So it was really good. I'm not really one for reading crime as such. I know I read a lot of murder mysteries, but that is more about the trying to figure out what happened rather than the actual crime, if that makes sense. I'm not somebody that handles crime wonderfully, so I don't tend to watch a lot of crime related things or listen to a lot. But this one was really nicely done. It was interesting, and there were some funny bits in it. There were some quite sad and upsetting things, but handled in a really nice way, so it wasn't like offensive, if that makes sense. Because some of the things that she talked about, if it had been done differently, I definitely couldn't have read it. But it was really good. Just a nice change from everything else I've read. So I liked that one a lot. Then I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I loved. Really good book. It's funny because Evelyn is not the best of people. She makes some very dodgy choices in her life. She does a lot of kind of despicable things, but you still can't help but like her. She has a big secret, which you find out at the end, which is related to the other main character in the story. But you find out so much about her life. So she was like a film star, and ends up getting married 7 times, and it's all about the loves of her life, the people that she really cared about. And yeah, it's a fantastic book. I can't really say much without giving it away, but I loved it. Really, really loved it. One of my top books from this year. Definitely would recommend it. I feel like I should say more about it, but I kind of don't want to, because I think I'll spoil it if I give more away. But it's definitely worth reading. I actually listened to it, and the audiobook was great because it was done. It was just, it felt like you were in that environment. You were in her life. You were listening to her speaking, because they have, like, the voices changed depending on who's speaking. It was really good. So it's about 2 hours later, my phone ran out of batteries as I was recording and speaking, and then I had to go and get the girl, grab some lunch, get the girl and take her to football. So she's there now. So I'm going to try and finish this book vlog really quickly while she's occupied and while there's peace and quiet in the house. So I was saying about Evelyn. It's set in a combination of the past and her present life, her telling this story. So she picks out a journalist that she wants to tell her story to, one person that she would trust to tell her story, And as it turns out at the end, there's a very good reason for that. But you don't find out to the very end. But I love that when in the audiobook, so there's Monique, the journalist, and then there's Evelyn. And so you feel like it's Evelyn really talking to you, telling you her memories, but also like she's reliving them as she's talking, which is, it worked amazingly. I really loved it. So if you can get the audiobook, it's a good one, because sometimes audiobooks aren't the best for for getting the story across properly. Some people are great at narrating a story, and then other people, it just spoils it. So, but that is a very good audiobook. I really loved it. So we're down to the last two, and then we're up to date with where I am at the moment. Not with the ones I'm reading, but that I have read. So I read The Last List of Mabel Beaumont. So this book is really interesting, and I would recommend it, but it's the only book that's ever gotten me crying in by the end, like the middle of the second chapter. Yeah, like the very beginning of the book. I've never had a book that's able to bring me to tears so early on without even really caring about the characters, but I did instantly. So her husband always made lists, and would leave them lying around, and he dies, and she finds one list that says find D, and that's all it says. And so she goes on a journey to find her friend from when she was very young, called Dot, and because she believes that's the message he's left, but she hasn't seen her for, I think it's like 60 odd years. And it's really good because there's lots of things come out as time goes on. So for a long time she's not been happy. She makes herself kind of reclusive and doesn't want to do anything, and he was always the outgoing one, wanting to make friends, speak to people, things. So it's kind of her rebuilding her life after she loses him as well. And yeah, it was a really lovely story. Although there's things that she does that I'm like, as I was reading it, the tone seemed sharper than I think it was probably meant to. But yeah, it makes sense if you read it, but it's a good book. I enjoyed it. It's nice to read an older perspective too. I think having read like Evelyn Hugo looking back over her life, Mabel Beaumont doing the same, it's good to have that, because like I've spent a good amount of time working with sort of more elderly people, and the things you learn as people look back over their life is amazing. And these two books were kind of like that, that we all question things that we've done, choices we've made, think what if something had been different. But it's good because when you're in the middle of a busy time in your life, it's nice to think about other people and other things and realise that we all make decisions and we just have to live with them, but you can make things better, or you can accept the way things are, which is really important, I think. So that's another one that I would recommend. And then the last one I've read is Wait for Me. So this one, it said, was based on a true story of someone who felt they had been reincarnated, was having past life dreams, or nightmares actually, and his journey to find his past life. So now I am really interested in reincarnation, and that kind of that there's more to life than just one life. So this one really interested me, but so it's kind of got a dual timeline. It's got the story of, goodness, their names are going out of my head, Florence and Rupert, set in around the time of the Second World War, and then a modern day person who thinks that he was Rupert. And I loved Florence and Rupert's story. But I was a bit disappointed because it didn't really work out the way I was kind of expecting. And I know that's just my personal, what I hoped the book would be, and it wasn't. And that's just me. That was nothing to do with the writer, and it was probably more realistic. That didn't have the kind of resolution I was expecting, but it was good. It just was different than I thought. So it's going to be one of those days where I keep having to edit the video and stop it because it's just the way things are going. Yeah, so I have gotten to the end of all the books I've read. So the ones that I'm reading just now, I'm reading The Lost Bookshop, which is a dual timeline about, I've only just started listening to it actually, and it's a dual timeline between somebody called Opaline, I think that's her name, who started bookshop as far as I can tell, and then a girl, an Irish girl in the present time who must discover it. But I've only just started listening to it, so I'm not entirely sure because I've only gotten like a chapter or something of it, or two. But I think that should be good. The blurb sounded good anyway. I am reading The Time Between Us, which is a dual timeline as well, set World War II and present day, or as near as can be. And I think it's the present day girl that goes in search of her so she's lost her granddad. She goes to the beaches where his friend was killed, the landing beaches, and I have a feeling that there's something going to, like a twist in the story going to come out about his friend and him and the girl that he fell in love with and all that stuff. Although I don't know totally yet because I'm only part of the way through that as well. So I'm reading that on Kindle. I've got the audiobook, The Lost Bookshop. Then I've got this one, which is the library book that I'm reading, which I read a good chunk of already on the plane. So I'm really enjoying it. Although it's another one of those ones that doesn't feel realistic. It's set in Edinburgh in a bookshop before Christmas, and this girl is doesn't have a good relationship with her sister, and her sister is the lawyer of the man who owns the bookshop, and the bookshop's going to like close and the man's going to be destitute if something doesn't happen to save the bookshop. And the girl's sister's looking for a job, and she's like, right, you do it. And it's at that stage just now, there's a lot of friction between them, but she's trying to start helping the bookshop survive. But it said she grew up on the west coast of Scotland, and then she's like, I can't remember what age she is, in her 20s or something, or maybe nearly 30, and she goes to Edinburgh for the first time. She doesn't know that there's lots of hills and lots of steps, and I'm like, I don't really know anybody that lives in Scotland that hasn't at some point been to Edinburgh growing up and have an idea of what it's like. So I did find that kind of hard to accept, I must be honest. It doesn't have the true Scottish kind of feel about it, but anyway, I'm still enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. It's probably done so that it explains it for people who don't know Edinburgh, but sometimes that just doesn't sit so well with people who do know it. But anyway, so I'm reading that one. As I said, I started this one, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which I can't wait to continue with, but I need to finish the audiobook because it has to go back in about 10 days, and this library book, and I have another few that I shared recently, so I need to read them as well. So the coffee one's going to have to wait probably. And then I've also got another one that I started a while ago, which I think will be good. I've read a couple of chapters of it, but the timing wasn't right. But it's called Things a Bright Girl Can Do, and it's two girls that are inspired by the suffragettes, set in the time of the suffragettes, and I think how they're going to stand up and be their own people. So I think that will be really good. I'm looking forward to that. I love that the spine of it has the suffragette colours, which is so cool. It'll look nice on a bookshelf. I do love one of my plans for the new year is to redecorate in parts of our house and put up a lovely big bookshelf and make a reading area. To be honest, I probably won't get peace because it's the way, like, not just, that sounded selfish, I don't mean that as a selfish thing, I just mean there's always things going on, there's always like something on the TV and somebody needing something, and I've got things to do, or if the other people sit down peacefully I end up disturbing them. So it's just that kind of that way in our house. But it would be nice to have a space that in theory would be a reading space. Our girl loves reading, She's only just starting to have the confidence to read like any quantity of things on her own, but she really enjoys it. So it'd be nice as she grows up to have that kind of area that she knows she could sit down with a book and have a look at it, because even if it's just reference books, there's so much that kids can learn. I think it's lovely. So I want to have a nice area that we can gather all our books together. Plus I just love books. I love looking at them. The day I went to the library, it was just so nice to just look at all the spines of books. There's something about them that's just comforting, I think. Anyway, so that is, yeah, I think me up to date with the non-Agatha Christie books that I've read this year. And if I manage to finish any more before the end of Vlogmas, I'll share those as I come across them. Yeah, I think that's everything. So I will leave it there for today, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.